Now, what they find out is, hey, it's got nothing to do with what America's done to us. This is what we're supposed to do. This is what our holy book tells us to do. We're supposed to attack you guys. We're supposed to make war on you guys. We're supposed to take slaves every time we get the... And by the way, in that period of time, the Muslims took 1.25 million slaves during that period. They're just following what the book tells them to do. That's what our Prophet Muhammad told us to do, and that's what's written in the Quran, that we're supposed to subdue every nation that's not Islamic, and we're supposed to make slaves. And so that's what Adams and Jefferson learned for the first time, which is a whole different way of thinking from what they've got. We in America continue to send other negotiators over because there were 5 nations, and another negotiator that went over was William Eaton. And William Eaton got over, and his correspondence back to the State Department is all recorded, and it's all available for you to see. And William Eaton says the problem over here, he says the Muslims believe that the Americans are a feeble sect of Christians. Now, the significance of that statement is this, is that the Muslims had targeted what they called Christian nations, and were attacking Christian nations. And so they were attacking Sweden, they were attacking France, they were attacking Great Britain. They were attacking Norway. They were attacking the United States. The difference is all the other nations had navies and they fought back. Now, the Americans had no navy. We had no military. And so the Muslim, as Eaton said, he said, the Muslims believe that the Americans are a feeble sect of Christians. You guys don't even fight back. We attack you and you don't do anything to us at all. What a bunch of weak, spineless Christians you are. And he said, he continued, this is still William Eaton, he said, it's a maxim of the Muslim states that, quote, the Christians who would be on good terms with them must fight well or pay well. In other words, we're going to attack you because you're Christians, we're Muslims, we're supposed to do that, and you're either going to have to fight us really well or you're going to have to pay us really well. And that's the ransom that we were paying on these ships. And so as our negotiators are over there, Adams and Jefferson and Franklin, we came to reach treaties where we said, okay, we don't hate Muslims and you guys are attacking us, but here's the deal. We'll pay you $1 million a year or $5 million a year, or we'll give you all these things if you'll not attack us. And that was called tribute. We would give them tribute payments. And it was extortion. It was straight out extortion, straight out blackmail. And so we were signing these treaties with all these Muslim nations, and we were having to renew the treaties. And so we would give these annual stipulations. And that's the way it was when George Washington came to office. That's what Congress was doing. And the axiom is that you have to fight well or you have to pay well. Well, he certainly couldn't fight well. The army we did have, we sent home at the end of the American Revolution, and we didn't believe in standing armies back then. I mean, if we needed the army, we would tell them to go get their squirrel guns off the fireplace and come back and fight again. But that was without realizing that there were nations overseas who were beginning to attack us. I mean, we were willing to defend our home ground, and when the British invaded us, we're willing to fight here. But now Americans in international waters are being attacked elsewhere, and we've got no way to defend them. So we have no military, so the only option we have is to pay well. And you'll find that Washington had to do that, but he did not like it. And as a matter of fact, by the time you get to 1795, which is the next to the last year of his administration, he's in his second term, he's halfway through the second term, and in 1795, amazingly, 16% of the federal budget was spent in dealing with Muslim terrorism. Can you imagine that? 1/6 of the entire federal budget under George Washington was directed at payments to these Muslim terrorists. We don't have an army, so we have to pay. And now 1/6 of the entire federal budget is these extortion payments. And you can imagine Washington was not a happy camper. I mean, he is a soldier. He's been a soldier all of his life. He's used to fighting enemies. Now he's having to pay them. He made a very clear statement. This is what Washington declared. He said, quote, "Would to heaven that we had a navy able to reform those enemies to mankind or to crush them into non-existence." He gave the axiom, he said, to be prepared for war is one of the most effectual means of preserving peace. It was at this point that Washington really took America in a new direction. We didn't have standing armies, didn't believe in standing armies. We now see a need for a standing army. So George Washington says, look, we've got to have a military to defend Americans across the world. And so he went to Congress 1795 and he asked for military appropriations to build a navy. We've got to have a navy so that we can go over there and take care of these terrorists. That's the first time we made any advance toward a permanent military was in 1795 as a result of the war on terror that was going at that time. So 1795, he makes that appeal. Congress approves it. Now, in 1795, George Washington's vice president was John Adams. Now, John Adams has already been a negotiator over there. He's very familiar with that part of the world. And so John Adams now becomes president in 1796. He's elected, sworn in 1797. He becomes president, and he vigorously pursues the building of the United States Navy. As a matter of fact, to this day, John Adams is still called the father of the American Navy. I mean, it all got put together during his administration. Washington starts it, calls for it, gets the first funding started, but Adams really pursues it. Now, here's President Adams. He's seen this. He's seen what's going on. He's finally got a Navy. He can put the Marines on the ship, and the Navy can sell them overseas, and they can take care of those terrorists, and John Adams doesn't do it. Now, why would John Adams not do that? Why would he not go after those terrorists? Well, Adams had been there. He had negotiated with those guys. He knew how they thought. You know what he said? Adams said that he didn't want to send the military over because he didn't think the American people had the stomach for a prolonged war. And he knew that if they got in a war with those terrorists, it was going to last for a while. And knowing the American people and knowing what the terrorists were like, he knew that if we went after them, it was going to last for a good while. He just didn't think the American people would stomach that. So he didn't do it. Well, he was a president for 4 years. The next president that comes in is Thomas Jefferson, who was also one of those original negotiators. So here's Jefferson. Now, he's got a Navy, and he's been over there, and Jefferson has a whole different attitude from John Adams. He says, we're going over there, we're going to free those Americans, and we're going to thump those terrorists, and this is not going to happen again. And so he made an announcement of brand new policy. He was no longer going to pay the payments. Washington made the payments. Adams made the payments, but Jefferson's not going to do it. And by the way, when Jefferson came into office, the budget was up to 20% of the federal budget was spent on dealing with Muslim terrorists. So now 1/5 of the federal budget is dealing with Muslim terrorists, and Jefferson said no more. This is his quote. He said, quote, I was very unwilling that we should acquiesce in the humiliation of paying a tribute. I very early thought it would be best to effect a peace through the medium of war. He said, we're going to have peace, but not by pain. We're going to have peace by sending the Marines and the Navy over there. And so he did. He dispatched the first military expedition, and it went to the same region of the world where we're fighting the war on terror right now. That military expedition was led by General William Eaton. Now, William Eaton had been an early ambassador over there. Now he's been made a general, and he's taken the military over. He's in charge of this military expedition because he's been over there. He's negotiated. He knows them. He knows how they think. He knows that region of the world. He knows the topography, the geography. He knows the culture. So he's leading the military expedition over. There was a second prong that was sent under the command of Commodore Edward Preble. So our first military expedition goes over. We got the brand new Navy sailing the Marines over. And by the way, if you think about the Marine Corps hymn, it says, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. Why Tripoli? Well, Tripoli was one of those 5 Islamic nations that was attacking the Americans. And so that Tripoli, to the shores of Tripoli, the Marine Corps hymn actually refers to the very first war against Muslim terrorists way back under Thomas Jefferson. So General Eaton gets there and loads the Marines. They start marching across the country dealing with the terrorists. And after it was all over, he has the memoirs of his life, and he wrote it all out and told about what happened in that war. And it says that he marched across the desert from Egypt and on through. And he says in his memoirs, on the title of the book, it says, several years an officer in the United States Army, consul or diplomat at the Regency of Tunis on the coast of Barbary, and commander of the Christian and other forces that marched from Egypt through the desert of Barca in 1805, conquered the city of Dern, which led to the Treaty of Peace between the United States and the Regency of Tripoli. Now, Tripoli, interesting title to use. You may have heard something about what's called the Treaty of Tripoli. The Treaty of Tripoli, Alan Colmes and other secularists love to cite this. If you say, oh, America has Christian principles, they say, no way. Treaty of Tripoli, done in 1797, says this. Article 11 says the government of the United States is in no sense founded on the Christian religion. So what do you say about that? Well, I was on Alan Colmes' radio program for an hour, and that's all he could talk about was, Barton, you're all wrong. Founding fathers weren't Christians, and they didn't have Christian foundations because the Treaty of Tripoli, 1797, says the government of the United States is in no sense founded on the Christian religion. Now, Tripoli was one of those 5 Muslim nations that was attacking Americans. And I keep pointing out to Alan, you put a period in the middle of the sentence. That's not what Article 11 says. Here's what Article 11 says. The government of the United States is in no sense founded on the Christian religion that has a hatred of the laws, religion, and tranquility of Muslims. What we said is, guys, we're not the Christians that hate Muslims. Now, you've had that in Europe. I mean, we went through the Inquisition and the Crusades, and all these Christian nations were attacking Muslim nations, and so you had the Star Chambers, and you had the torture and the Inquisition, where they were, you had church leaders saying, hey, Christians, you undo something good for Jesus, go find a Muslim, cut his head off. And so that was happening, burning Muslims at the stake. And so the Muslims say, we're repaying all you Christians for what you did to us in the Inquisition and the Crusades and when the Spains expelled the Moors and etc. So we're repaying you for all. And the Article 11 of the Treaty of Tripoli says, wait a minute, we're not those Christians. We're not Christians that have a hatred of Muslims. That's not who we are. And in America, we made that real clear.